Good morning and welcome to our Tuesday morning class. Glad to have all of you here with us. I thought it would be most appropriate as we approach the high holidays to have certain parts of the high holiday services and certain high holiday themes as our topics. This morning's topic is Yizkor. Before we do anything else, let me take that word Yizkor in Sephardi Hebrew and try to tell you what it means. It means he will remember or may he remember. Remembering the departed. The he is God. We are asking God to remember the souls of our departed. A little bit of context. In a standard Reform Jewish Yom Kippur service during the day, you would have the morning service, you'd have a break, you'd have the afternoon service, you'd have Yizkor, then you'd have Ne'ilah, the concluding service. It wasn't always structured this way. Even now, traditionally, Yizkor is in the morning, right after the Torah reading, the Torah scrolls, the Ark open, and you have approximately 3 to 4 pages in which you remember the departed. Now, mention which departed in a second. In Mishkan HaNefesh, the new High Holiday Prayer Book, published by the Central Conference of American Rabbis, we have almost 100 pages. What a difference. A change as to where it is in the sequence of events on Yom Kippur Day, and the expansion of Yizkor. How did Yizkor come about? It's not all that ancient. Only about 1,000 years. And that's not so long in all of Jewish history. As crusaders were going through the Rhineland on their way to liberate the land of Israel from the Muslims, they saw Jewish communities and said, if we find Muslim rule so offensive in the land of Israel, and they didn't call it the land of Israel, they called it the Holy Land, how offensive it is that there are Jewish communities right here, and there were horrendous massacres of Jews in the Rhineland. Those martyrs were remembered. They were remembered in poetry. They were remembered in liturgy, in prayers. They were remembered in memorial books, and communities had their memorial books of the names of those martyrs in that community, and those names were read out for centuries. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This practice of remembering martyrs was expanded upon in the 17th century when there were similar attacks on Jews in Eastern Europe. I think a good way of trying to explain this and why we have Yizkor on Yom Kippur, we're reminding God that there were enough of our people who were loyal enough to God, that they would not reject the Torah, would not reject God, even if it meant losing their lives. These martyrs accrued to themselves enough extra merit, so to speak. We hope, we beg God that we will have some of that extra merit spill over on us. Yizkor, as we know it now, on Yom Kippur and on the festivals of Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot, adding the festivals was again a later expansion of Yizkor, is a very significant part of our synagogue life. The phone rings. What time is the Yizkor service? What does that tell us? People aren't going to come, and we know this, it's a reality, we're describing a reality. People are not going to come to Yom Kippur and be there all day. They are going to come for the Yizkor service, and they'll leave afterwards. I think something is missing theologically and religiously, but we should build on what we have. And we should celebrate at least that people are willing to come to any service for whatever reason. Now, Yizkor expanded its significance. It's expanded its significance because when we remember the martyrs of the Rhineland or the martyrs of Eastern Europe, we thought of our own loved ones who are no longer with us, and it expanded to include them. So, for example, in the High Holiday booklet, which we're sending out to you with lists of prayers, we have the prayers beginning Yizkor Elohim, may God remember, and we have a space for a father, a mother, a husband, a wife, a sister, a brother, a child, and so forth. But at the end, the martyrs. It used to be that the martyrs, that was the significant part. But we relate personally, and we relate personally as mourners, for we have lost people close to us. That is an expansion of Yizkor, to include our personal loved ones. It's an expansion of Yizkor to include Yizkor on the 3 festivals. It's another expansion to go beyond just those 3 or 4 pages that are in a traditional prayer book and have the expanded Yizkor service, and I'm saying service here, that we have in Mishkan HaNefesh. Yizkor isn't technically a service. It's part of a service. To be a service, you have to have an Amidah. The part that begins Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, our God and God of our ancestors. That's not part of Yizkor. These are technical terms, I know, but I need to point them out. Yizkor has become a freestanding part of the service because it meets the needs of our people, which is a good way of explaining a lot of the changes in Jewish liturgy. So on Yom Kippur, where we're supposed to ask God for forgiveness, which I hope we do, we also change the mood completely and remember our deceased relatives. Whether we are hoping that their good deeds were so great that extra can spill over on us or not, whether we're even aware of that concept, we make a major focus here on our dead relatives. And there's a lot of folklore involved in this. I mentioned, not that long ago, the coming of the going, the people who come just for Yizkor and then leave right after Yizkor. You have the opposite phenomenon. People who leave when Yizkor begins and then come back afterwards. Folklore says that if your parents are still alive, you shouldn't be there at a memorial service. It's just folklore. Folklore says that if your parents are still alive, you shouldn't say Kaddish. Again, just folklore. Now, I'm going to speak personally. I'm going to say that I can argue, I think very well, both sides of the story. In my own practice, I would go to Yizkor services with my father after his parents passed away. I did not say the memorial prayers, but I was with him for support. Similarly, when his parents passed away and it was time for Kaddish and he was saying Kaddish, I didn't say Kaddish, but I was with him supporting him. Standard Reform practice with many variations today is for everyone to stand up and say Kaddish. That's the way we do it at TBI. Historically, it's not done that way. Just the mourners, or just those who have yahrzeit. Again, I really feel emotionally and historically I can support both positions. If the first time you go to a Yizkor service after a parent dies, and you have no idea what to expect, that's not very good. You're going to be lost. If you have been to Yizkor services before, you know what to expect and you know what to say. Similarly with Kaddish, and let me use Kaddish as this example. In our Hebrew schools, we teach the kids all kinds of things. We teach them how to do the Kiddush. We teach them how to do the Torah blessings. We teach them the sorts of things they are going to need throughout their Jewish lives. We don't teach them Kaddish. Now, they're going to need Kaddish, But if, let's say, I were teaching a Hebrew school class and the kids come home and mommy and daddy say, "What did you learn today?" "Oh, we learned how to say the Kaddish." Wait, the phone calls. It would be overwhelming. "Are you wishing us dead?" So we've got that sort of superstition, and we have the embarrassing moments of people not knowing what to do. And for example, I'm just giving this as an example. I could have thought of this earlier too. The little pamphlets that the funeral homes give out. It's standard. They get them from some supply company that services all Jewish funeral homes, Jewish and otherwise. They've got the Kaddish there, and they've got it in transliteration. So for people who can't read it or who haven't really paid attention, so they've got it memorized, know what to do. We have overemphasized the Kaddish, and I'm not saying that's wrong. Kaddish is not the Jewish memorial prayer. El Maleh Rachamim is. O God, full of compassion, and may you protect under your presence, the wings of your presence, again understood metaphorically, the deceased. We want to remember our loved ones. We want to remember the good things they did, and then we are almost begging God to remember those things too. I want to give another example of what I think is going on in here. I'm including Rosh Hashanah, not just Yizkor. On Rosh Hashanah, one of the Torah readings is that God asks Abraham to bind up his son as a sacrifice. Abraham is willing to do it. It doesn't happen, that's good. But it goes to Abraham's credit that he didn't do it. Now, here is what's going on, in my opinion, and I'm going to give my sort of modern example. I am appealing to somebody for a favor. In this case, it's a favor from God to forgive me of my misdeeds. I need to make some sort of connection. If I want a favor from someone, sometimes I have to have a connection, and it helps, let's say, if this guy knew my father. So here, father isn't my natural father, my biological father, but Abraham. And I'm basically saying to God, you knew my dad, Abraham, and look what he was willing to do. Now, have some understanding, some sympathy, some forgiveness for me. Therefore, Yizkor, in my opinion, should be more than just remembering our own relatives. Though, what a wonderful thing that is. We need to pay tribute to those who came before us. As our tradition says, if it weren't for our parents, we wouldn't be here. Interestingly enough, the main obligation for saying Kaddish and for saying El Maleh Rachamim is for parents. It's expanded for siblings, spouse, children. And then how can you say no? The loss of a grandchild, God forbid, even more poignant, even more painful. The loss of a teacher who, like a father, gives you a different sense, a different aspect of life. And when we gather together, we bring together all kinds of customs and traditions over the ages. Let me mention one more for Yizkor, and this has a very, very practical concern. You know, on one of the walls in our sanctuary at TBI, we have the memorial plaques. And we have a little light bulb that goes on at the time of the yard site, the anniversary of the passing, but we're supposed to have all those lights on at Yizkor for Yom Kippur and for the festivals. Now, it's a lot of work to turn them on, to get the little caps that cover them off taken off. In some congregations, you screw in a light bulb, different procedures. And by the way, I'm not negotiating for this in the slightest. It's a waste of money. But we could buy some sophisticated program whereby everything just goes on and off at its appropriate time. You program it in advance. Nobody has to worry about it at all. In a different generation, which we remember, we would light a yahrzeit candle on the anniversary of the death and on the high holidays. How old is this? And where did this custom come from? go into any cathedral. We pick this up from the surrounding society, and there's nothing wrong with that, as we have influenced them, so they have influenced us. So these memorial services that we talk about and take so seriously that if you want to talk about synagogue attendance, this is a very important factor. We keep in mind that a liturgy that was developed a long time ago as an extra reminder of 3 to 4 pages turns into a good 100 pages of different readings. No, you're not supposed to read all of them. That's not the idea in the slightest. Mishkan HaNefesh is supposed to give us opportunities to select and to choose. We don't put all of them in there. And by the way, if you get bored during the service, you're not supposed to sit there and stare and look at people. Look at the other readings. Look at the material at the bottom of the page. Good reading and study and inspirational material. Again, let us put everything together. We Jews on the high holidays and on every other occasion pray not just as individuals, we pray as part of a larger community. Even if we are at home and we have to see a pre-recorded service, which unfortunately we have to do this year, even if that's the case, we're still part of a community. And we remember our ancestors, not just our own physical ancestors, but those who in previous generations died rather than reject God and God's Torah. In our own lifetimes, we have given a special emphasis to the Shoah, the destruction, the murder of European Jewry in the 1940s. You only need to turn the clock back a couple of decades in Europe. The First World War, the wars after the First World War, all the horrors in Ukraine, to recognize that there were outrageous attacks on Jews and large-scale murders even before then. So we don't need to go back to the 11th or the 17th centuries. We can go back to the 20th centuries. And when we do that, we can't help but connect with our own immediate ancestors. And really, for all I know, and we're learning more and more about our members, we could have members of the congregation who had families who escaped from those horrors before the Hitler period. I can put my own connection in there very easily. That could be another talk, another time, in another place, before the Hitler period, which would be commemorated to a much greater degree if it hadn't been overshadowed by the Shoah. So as we gather together on Yom Kippur, and as we pause, I always want to have a break between the afternoon and the memorial service to give people a chance to leave unobtrusively and to come in unobtrusively. And similarly, after Yizkor, let us think not just of our beloved parents, spouses, siblings, children, God forbid, grandchildren who are no longer with us, but also those throughout the ages who were loyal to God and to God's Torah. I hope I have given you some sense of the meaning of Yizkor, putting it in its historical context. And I put that in the plural, because wherever it is in the service, an example I could give, in one of my previous congregations, we thought we would take Yizkor out of the afternoon and put it right at the end of the morning service to keep the people there, so they wouldn't have to go home and then come back. I'm not suggesting we do that now. Each place is different. What works in one place might not work in another. But the idea that this is such an important thing, that realistically I know our office staff will be getting phone calls, and so will I. What time is Yizkor? We've got it in the program that we sent out in our bulletin, which arrived at our house just yesterday. It says what time all the services are, and we will not start the Yizkor service until the time that is so appropriated. I realize its importance, and may we keep our heritage alive as we keep the memory of our ancestors alive in this and other meaningful rituals in our Jewish life. At this point, I am going to stop this part of the service, or the class, I should say, and I am going to suggest we pause for a few minutes, and then we will begin our